President Trump's special envoy to Greenland, Jeff Landry, is in the capital GIUK to attend a business conference with U.S. Ambassador to Denmark, Kenneth Howery. The U.S. Embassy in Copenhagen saying the goal is to meet a wide range of Greenlanders, to listen and learn with a goal of expanding economic opportunities, building people-to-people ties, and increasing understanding between the United States and Greenland. And of course, on screen, you have our next guest, Rod D. Martin, a geopolitical strategist and the founder and CEO of Martin Capital, here to break it all down with us. Good to see you, Rod. It's been a few months since Greenland was in the headlines. So why might it be resurfacing now as a priority for the Trump administration?
Well, these things never go away. They just get, sidelined out of the headlines because we have so many pertinent things going on. And, we're talking about Iran in the earlier segment. It's not that the president lost focus on Iran, it's that we had a China summit last week. Well, the Greenland negotiations have been going on now since January. We had this big kerfuffle going into the summit in January with all of our European friends, and we came to a framework agreement with Mark Rutte, who is the General Secretary of NATO. And on the basis of that, we've had a working group discussing a way forward between the United States, Denmark, and Greenland all this time since. And this mission is definitely trade and relationship focused. There isn't going to be some huge breakthrough probably in terms of a transfer of sovereignty or anything like that. But here's the truth. Right now, but something between 56 and 70% of Greenlanders, if you ask them, if you had a referendum, would vote for independence from Denmark. There's a reason for that. Denmark is a colonial overlord. They have treated Greenland terribly, including forced sterilizations of native women and just complete neglect of the Greenlandic economy. Yes, they have a Scandinavian welfare state going, but they don't have any economic opportunity for their children's futures, and they have the highest suicide rate of any country on the planet. The problem for Greenland is they can't afford independence. They want it, they can't pay for it. And so there is a deal to be made here. The only question is its shape.
And what do you think it will take for Greenlandians to really come on board in terms of what the U.S. really wants to do with Greenland and has voiced its hope to take more control of that island due to, walk us through also what the U.S. is really wanting it for, this national security angle?
Well, there are multiple ways forward that don't all have to happen simultaneously for the president to win. The biggest one, as you say, is national security. If we are going to have less Arctic sea ice, and that is certainly debatable, but even if not, if we're going to have more nuclear-powered icebreakers, which is almost certainly going to happen as small modular nuclear becomes more and more available and affordable, if those things are true, Greenland controls some pretty important sea lanes. They do anyway if you're concerned about the Russians. This has always been Greenland, the anchor of the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, which was so essential in preventing Nazi submarines from entering the North Atlantic. It was essential during the Cold War to prevent the Soviets from being able to disrupt an American reinforcement of Europe in the event of World War III. It's still important today. So you have this national security aspect. You certainly do as far as missile defense because of just where Greenland sits. We need it for that. But the thing is, you can have those things without an actual transfer of sovereignty. And my guess is a minimal configuration would be something like the sovereign base agreement that the UK has with Cyprus. That doesn't impinge on anybody, and it gets the permanence that the United States needs. We also need to guarantee that the Chinese and the Russians aren't in Greenland and don't have access to Greenland. But third, we have a way to give them their cake and eat it too. We have done this in 3 different Pacific countries that couldn't afford independence but wanted to be free, and we entered into compacts of free association with them that let them have all of the benefits of independence, but we pay for their security, we pay for their embassies, we take care of all the things. I'm Rod Martin. I write a lot about abuses of our constitutional order, and I love our founding fathers' vision of constitutional liberty. Sadly, a lot of people these days disagree. Leftist politicians and judges in both parties have been twisting the founders' words for over a century to achieve, frankly, authoritarian ends worse than those the founders fought. For once, the Supreme Court is helping, but it's not enough. 250 years is a long time, and a lot of errors have crept in. We need a solution that closes the loopholes used to take power from the people. The good news is the founders gave us that solution. They gave us Article 5 right there in the Constitution itself, so that when the normal processes of government weren't enough, the people would always have the power to act. An Article 5 convention, elected delegates whose work must be ratified by 38 states to take effect, can close the loopholes and restore the founders' vision. That's why I support my friends at the Convention of States Foundation. Check them out at conventionofstatesfoundation.org. Sign up for the newsletter and hit that donate button. Every car needs a tune-up once in a while. America needs one now. That make it too expensive to be free. And I think ultimately that's where the Trump administration is going to land, and I think that's a reasonable path forward for Greenland.
And so do you see this step as a kind of softening of the methods of joining forces with Greenland and perhaps bringing them on board with that way that they can still maintain control themselves, and yet there's this aspect of really needing to counter, as you say, Beijing, also Russia's presence in that region?
Well, there's very much a dance going on here. You know, the Greenlanders are in a bit of a spot. They're highly dependent on a large subsidy from Denmark, which is, by the way, a fraction of what the United States could easily spend on 57,000 Greenlanders. So you know, you're talking about a colonial overlord that doesn't have the technology and doesn't have the resources to produce the kind of economic future for young Greenlanders that they need and would hope for. The United States can provide that. The United States would happily do so because we need to develop some of those resources, and somebody's going to anyway. It's just a matter of who and when. Interestingly enough, there was some polling data here about a year ago that said that Greenlanders liked the United States in a pretty significant way, specifically that they thought our environmental laws were better than the Europeans. I just found that really amusing. So I think there's a way forward. Now we're in the courtship. You know, Landry and my friend Ken Howry, who is the ambassador from the U.S. to Denmark, are up there in NUK this week. They're talking to people. They're building relationships. I think that's going to be essential. And if we can show these folks that there is a pathway for them literally to have their cake and eat it too, to be independent, to not have to pay the bills that would harm their standard of living even further, I think we could actually get to an arrangement that looks a lot like Palau or the Marshall Islands. And that could be wonderful for everybody, honestly, including Denmark, because Denmark can't defend Greenland and they really can't afford the subsidy either. So there'd be some pride points that would probably hurt here and there. But I think we could get to something that really is better for everybody involved and certainly for NATO.
Well, we'll be watching it closely, as I'm sure it will come back into the headlines more broadly as time goes on. Thank you so much, Rod Martin. Good to speak with you.
Thank you.